In this episode, we take stock of climate finance before the COP28. We also give you an update on a pneumonia outbreak in China. But first, we talk about a person who is known as Escape Karthik for escaping prison and police custody multiple times. Hi, I am Utsa Sarmin and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week, a 33-year-old man, Karthik Kumar, was arrested by Bengaluru police with 70 lakh rupees worth of gold and silver jewellery. Now, what is noteworthy here is the fact that this is the 18th time Karthik has been arrested over the last 18 years. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Kiran Parashar, he told us more about Karthik.
So his mother works as a housemaid and his father is a street vendor. He runs a small kebab shop in Bangalore. So at a very early age, he was kind of attracted towards all these thefts and other things. He studied till 6th standard. After that, he did some odd jobs. And by 2005, when he was some 16 years old, the first time he was with a set of people with whom they stole a lot of valuables from a house in Hennur police limits. But then he was not caught and total amount that they had stolen from this house was worth rupees 10 lakhs.
Now this was the first time Karthik had realized that he could make a quick buck by stealing. And that realization led him to embark on a life of crime. Kiran says that Karthik soon started stealing from empty houses.
So basically, he built a team of 4 members. They used to go on bikes during evenings and watch these empty houses. So they used to recognize empty houses by 2 things. One is that if the newspapers are not taken, the newspapers which the newspaper boys drop, which are not taken, and also the rangolis which they draw in front of the house. If it is there for a long time, then they decide that it's an empty house. So then what they do is they go during the night and steal all these valuables and they sell it for a very lower cost, so the buyer will also buy it.
Now, as Kiran had mentioned, Karthik started this life in 2005, and the first time he was caught by the police was 2 years later in 2007, who then sent him to central prison. However, here is when matters start getting complicated.
So even in 2007, when Central Crime Branch police arrested him, he was still Karthik. That's it. He was a thief and he was Karthik. But he was having great athletic skills and he could run, jump and climb at any places. He had very good abilities. So once what happened was he managed to escape from prison. So what had happened is ISKCON was providing food to the Parapanagrara central prisons at that point of time. So a vehicle had brought food for the prisoners. So taking advantage of the situation, Karthik managed to get under the chassis of the vehicle and he managed to flee. So it took 45 days for the police to again nab him because when he escapes from the prison, it becomes a very serious issue from police point of view because somebody is escaping from the prison is considered to be very serious in nature. So after 45 days, he was caught.
And this is when the police gave him a nickname, Escape Karthik. And it's noteworthy to mention here that this was not the only time that Karthik had escaped from prison or police custody.
Even in 2010, when he was arrested by Jeevan Bhima Nagar police in Bangalore, he was taken to places for questioning. Then he was taken to places and he had managed to escape even then. But he was caught very next day. So in 2013, when he was caught by Banaswadi police, again he had managed to escape from their custody. So it was quite a daunting task for police to ensure that Karthik won't escape from their custody. So till 2013, he had already 3 times he had escaped, once from the prison and 2 times from the police custody. But later, his girlfriend's brother had hit him on his leg, which led to a permanent injury. So since then, he was not as quick as he was, whether it was in running or jumping or climbing. He was not as quick as he was.
But that didn't stop Karthik from continuing with his stealing spree. In fact, over the last 18 years, he has been accused in 83 cases. And when Kiran spoke to police officials, they informed him that Karthik likes to maintain a lavish lifestyle using the money from the thefts.
And he also has this habit of gambling. So prior to 2014-15, he used to be involved in gambling in the city outskirts where he used to spend huge money. But after 2015, he started visiting Goa casinos where he used to spend a lot of money. And also he spends a lot of money on his attires. For example, last time when he was caught, a police officer who went to Goa to arrest him told me that this guy was wearing expensive Crocs and a t-shirt worth rupees 5,000 rupees. And the place that he was staying was more than 10,000 rupees a day. So these are the kind of places where he lives. And also Escape Karthik is not something new to the Bangalore police. So that is why Karthik also has a different plan. For example, after stealing all these things, he doesn't take flight to leave this city because he believes that in the airport there will be a police monitoring all the airport area. So what he does is he takes a bus to a different state. So after that he will take flights because like in Goa airport nobody will recognize him. For example, last time when police arrested him, he had taken a bus from Bangalore to Goa, Panaji. So after Panaji he took a flight to Delhi. After that he went to Manali and he came back to Goa after his luxurious trip. So he came back to Goa when police arrested him. So he is somebody who has spent a lot of money on his personal life and alcohol and other things. So one of the police officers said that he knows that he would be caught someday because as the police has his fingerprints and other things.
Now, as Kiran mentioned, Karthik knows that police would catch him, and that's what had happened 18 times. However, what's interesting is the fact that he would manage to get a bail every time.
There was about 18 non-bailable warrants executed against Escape Karthik. So if I have to explain this bail process, so basically what happens is like many other prisoners, under trial prisoners. So Karthik also goes to the jail. So he will identify people who are getting released from the jail. So he holds a conversation with them and he lures money saying that you help me to get a lawyer so that I'll help you with the money and other things. So the under trial prisoner who is released out of the prison, he goes and contacts the lawyer. And the lawyer is deployed and Karthik usually during the court hearing always brings in his ailing mother, father, poverty and his wife's situation into the picture, and citing all these things as the grounds, he approached for the bail. So most of the times he has got bail from the courts. The simple reason is that when I speak to the legal experts, what they say is Karthik has not committed any physical or violent offenses like stabbing somebody or killing somebody. He hasn't done anything. So only in cases of if there is a theft and theft in private houses and all these places, the courts also give a bit of leniency to the accused while the hearing may continue, but the courts also give a certain amount of leniency. That is one. And another thing is whenever Karthik commits a crime and goes to jail, and once he comes out, it is very hard for the police to catch him because they don't know where are his hideouts and where he will be. So next time when they catch, at least they will crack more than 4 or 5 theft cases. So when we see the number of theft cases and the number of times that he has been arrested, you can see the numbers are not very proportionate. For 83 theft cases, he has been only arrested for 18 times. So when he is out of the prison, he will be engaged in stealing activities, but he'll do a lot of thefts till the time he gets caught.
Now, apart from escaping or securing bail, another concern that the police have is about Karthik's behavior in police custody, which often makes their jobs difficult.
For example, when I was speaking to a police officer who has worked for more than 2 decades in Bengaluru city alone, he said that the moment they arrest him, they bring to the police station, he will hit his head to the wall to an extent that it bleeds, or he will swallow something to go to the hospital, or he does a lot of dramas. So if something happens in police custody, so the police will be held responsible. So they may have to face the heat of the courts. So even having Karthik in custody is also a big headache for the police as well. That is one. And second thing is, so after getting hit to the wall, all this bleeding, when he is produced before the magistrate, usually Karthik comes up with, as the police say, usually Karthik comes up with his own version of saying that police have been assaulting him black and blue to just admit that he had stolen certain properties or certain things. So for police also, from the police point of view, he is an headache as long as he is in police custody.
And next we talk about climate finance. On the 30th of November, most of the world leaders will gather in Dubai for the 28th Annual Conference on Climate Change, the COP28, to measure the progress and find ways to respond to climate change. Now, when we spoke to the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha, he explained to us that this global response to climate change has three pillars.
The first pillar is your what is known as mitigation, basically cutting down of emissions, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a preventive step. The second step is adaptation, wherein you realize that even if you bring down all emissions to zero, climate will continue to change for a few years or a few decades. So having said that, adaptation takes care of the fact that we have to survive in this changed climate, at least for some years, and therefore you need to adapt to that. Things like, you have to attune your agriculture, for example, to higher temperatures, yielding varieties. You have to take care of water resources because that would become sparser in a high temperature world. So those kind of adaptation activities. And third part is loss and damage. The fact that, climate change impacts are already evident. You are already seeing the impacts of climate change taking place in the form of these extreme weather events. So you have floodings, you have droughts, you have extreme rainfall events. So that the loss and damage actually takes care of or tries to take care of that aspect, that the impacts are already evident, they are already happening, and you need to have at least the developing countries or the least developed countries, they need to have some sort of financial support system to be able to rebuild themselves after they have been struck by a disaster.
And all these three pillars cannot function or bring in the desired outcomes without funds. However, finance has turned out to be the biggest barrier in climate action. In fact, it was only last year, after years of struggle, that the world leaders had decided to create a fund for the third pillar, which is loss and damage. To know more about this fund and the concerns over climate finance, we speak to Amitabh in this segment. So Amitabh, last year we had seen a significant outcome, which is the creation of the Loss and Damage Fund. Can you first remind our listeners what is this Loss and Damage Fund?
Right. So last year in Egypt, where the climate change conference was happening, the single most important decision that came out, in fact, that was the only significant decision to have come out of that meeting, was the creation of what is known as the Loss and Damage Fund. Now, this Loss and Damage Fund has been talked about for very long. Basically, it tries to create a fund to financially help those countries which suffer damages because of climate disasters. So if a country is ravaged by floods, for example, or incessant rains, and there are damages, there are widespread damages because of that, then that country can claim some financial assistance from this fund if that weather event is assessed to have been caused by climate change. So that is the whole idea. And it was a very, very long pending demand. It came after a lot of struggle. So finally, it happened last year.
And we understand that this struggle or this push to create this fund, it came from the developing countries, right? They will be the primary beneficiaries of this fund, right?
Right. The beneficiaries of this are expected to be the developing countries. And even among the developing countries, it is the smaller countries and the island states which hope to benefit the most, mainly because they are also the ones who would face the maximum brunt of these climate disasters. And they themselves have done very little to create the problem, in the sense that they have never been emitting large number of greenhouse gases in any case. So they haven't contributed to the problem, but they face the brunt of the consequences of climate change. And that's how the argument goes, that therefore, in the idea of justice, they should have some sort of support system to be able to recover from these disasters. And that's the main argument for loss and damage in general, and for the creation of loss and damage fund in particular.
So Amitabh, a year has passed since the last COP, but we did not see any contribution to the loss and damage fund as of yet, right?
Yes, I don't think there is any money in the loss and damage fund as of now. There is zero amount promised as of now. That's also because the decision to create the fund was taken last year, but the fund has not come into existence. So they are still trying to agree on the structure of the fund and where the fund will be placed. Of course, I mean, even when the fund is not there, you could probably have seen it was possible for some countries to actually promise an amount to this fund, but that hasn't happened. So there is no fund as of now, and there is no money in the fund. What is being discussed right now is how this fund will be structured, and more importantly, where will it be placed. So there are two options that are being discussed. One of them is about placing this fund within the World Bank, which already exists. And the other thing is about creating a separate entity, creating a separate entity to manage this fund. So those two options are being discussed. There are pros and cons of both those things. There are supporters of both the ideas and there is opposition to both these ideas. So that has not been finalized. Probably we'll see some of that, hopefully getting finalized at this year's climate conference, which is starting later this week.
And Amitabh, apart from this fund, if we talk about climate finance, then under the 2015 Paris Agreement, the developing countries are also entitled to receive financial help from rich countries for the adaptation purpose, which, as you had mentioned earlier, falls under the second pillar of the climate response. So tell us about that aspect of climate finance.
Right. Now, the way international climate architecture is designed, the developed countries or the rich countries are the ones which are held primarily responsible for creating this problem of climate change. That's because these were the countries which had been emitting greenhouse gases for the last 100 years or so. And because they are primarily responsible for causing the problem, the idea is that they must be the ones who should take the lead in providing the solution as well. And the climate change architecture also talks about the fact that these countries should take the lead not just in reducing emissions, which is mitigation, right? So they should take the lead not just in cutting down their emissions, but should also provide the financial and technological support to the developing countries for them to be able to take effective action against climate change. Now, if that is the case, then the money primarily should be coming in from the developed countries. And that is the whole idea of climate finance. One of the things, as you pointed out, this applies to adaptation as well. So let's talk about, although India is slightly special case, but let's say India is one country, a developing country, which is already taking climate actions, both mitigation in terms of reducing its emissions or emission footprint, and also taking adaptation measures. Now, most of these actions would be financed by its own resources, but because the finances would be strained, India as a developing country can go and claim access to financial resources, access to technological resources from the developed countries. So it was decided in Glasgow, which is 2021, that, the countries should strive, and I'm talking about the developed countries, it's mainly about financial flows, that at least 40% of all the financial flows, all the climate finance that is coming in, should go to adaptation projects. So that was a decision that was taken in Glasgow.
Right, and can you talk about if there has been any progress with the adaptation fund since Glasgow?
So what we have seen now, there's a recent report that has come out that assesses the flow of money to adaptation projects. And that report has noted that in the last 1 year, the amount of or the proportion of money that was going to adaptation projects has actually come down. So instead of increasing, it has decreased. Right now, the adaptation projects account for barely 20 to 22% of all the money that is coming in. And it was noted that in the last year, the money going to adaptation projects has actually come down instead of going up. It is nowhere near the 40% target that was decided upon in Glasgow, but even what was available, it has come down from that. So this is the situation about adaptation finance. Not enough money going into adaptation projects, because of which lots of countries are not being able to undertake adaptation projects in their countries.
And considering the scenarios we just discussed right now regarding loss and damage fund and climate finance, it seems money is the primary barrier to climate action.
it is the biggest barrier. You require money for all sorts of things, without which there's nothing that is. Even for a country to measure its emissions, for example, is a very, very expensive kind of work, right? And lots of countries do not have the resources to devote even for this seemingly basic kind of work, just to collect data on, how much emissions are happening from their soil. So huge amount of money is required, and we just don't have enough flowing in. To just give you an estimate, the current assessment is that, you require at least tens of trillions of US dollars every year to be able to do everything that countries are in a position to do to fight climate change. Tens of trillions of dollars every year. What is flowing in right now is less than $100 billion. And for a lot of countries, especially the developing world, taking climate actions is a big hindrance because they just don't have the financial resources and nothing much is coming their way, despite the fact that the developed countries are mandated to provide this money. In fact, to be very sure, the expectation that the developed countries would take money out of their budgets and hand it to, say, a smaller country or a developed country to take climate action, that is an unrealistic sort of an expectation. We live in a real world. It's not going to happen that way in any case. But the idea was that these developed countries also control much of financial flows across the world. So it was possible to sort of mobilize finances in the right direction. I mean, that's the best case hope in any case. But even that has not happened. So what are we hearing these days? We are hearing, the last couple of years, what has happened is there has been an increased talk about restructuring of international financial flows so that, more money flows into climate actions. What that basically means is that the developing countries who need more money for their projects, for example, they should be in a position to access this international money with a greater degree of freedom. So there's a lot of talk that is happening, very little in terms of decisions right now. In fact, this talk has started only recently, not much time has passed. There's very little time left in any case for effective climate action. So basically what you said is completely right. If there is one big barrier to climate action, it has to be finance.
And in the end, we give you an update about a pneumonia outbreak in China that has raised concerns in India. At a time when China is seeing a spike in respiratory illnesses, the Indian government has initiated a review of the preparedness measure to combat such illnesses, saying that it is closely monitoring the situation and there was no need for alarm. A statement by the Health Ministry informed, quote, "In view of the recent reports indicating a surge in respiratory illness in children in northern China in the recent weeks, the Union Health Ministry has proactively decided to review the preparedness measures against respiratory illnesses as a matter of abundant caution. This is noted to be important in view of the ongoing influenza and winter season that results in an increase in respiratory illness cases. Government of India is closely monitoring the situation and indicated that there is no need for any alarm." Unquote. The statement also added that the Union Health Secretary, in a letter to the states and the Union Territories, has advised to immediately review public health and hospital preparedness measures, including the availability of HR, hospital beds, drugs and vaccines for influenza, medical oxygen, antibiotics, and functionality of oxygen plants. There has been a spike in reported incidents of respiratory illnesses in China. First reported by China's National Health Commission on November 13th, the illnesses have caused a surge in hospitalizations, with many hospitals warning of long waits. The situation came into the spotlight this week when the WHO asked China for more information on clusters of undiagnosed pneumonia in children. It's crucial to note here that China is witnessing this spike in illness as the country enters its first full winter season after lifting COVID-19 restrictions last December. You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. It was written and produced by me, Utsa Sarmin. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it and share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.